The smell of roasted turkey filled my childhood home that Thanksgiving evening. My mother stood at the head of the table, carving knife in hand, smiling at all of us like nothing was wrong. Allison sat beside me, still fragile from the miscarriage just 3 weeks before. When my mother looked at my wife and said those words about our loss, keeping the family bloodline pure, I set down my fork and stood up silently. None of them knew this would be their last family gathering. Before I share what happened next, let me know where you are watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below, and if stories about standing up for the people you love resonate with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Now let me take you back to where this all began. I met Allison on a rainy Tuesday afternoon in Seattle. I was 27 years old, working as a software engineer at a tech company downtown. She walked into this tiny coffee shop near my office, her dark hair damp from the rain, and she ordered the same drink I always got. We started talking, and 3 hours later, I knew I wanted to see her again. Allison worked as a nurse at the local hospital. She was born and raised in San Diego, California, though her parents had immigrated from the Philippines before she was born. She spoke perfect English, graduated top of her nursing class, and had this independence about her that I found incredibly attractive. Her smile could warm up any room. Her brown eyes held a depth that made me feel like she truly saw me whenever she looked my way. Her voice was gentle, but there was strength underneath it, a quiet power that drew me in from the very first conversation. We dated for 2 years before I even considered introducing her to my family. During that time, I fell completely in love with her. She understood me in ways no one else ever had. We would finish each other's sentences, laugh at the same terrible jokes, and spend entire weekends just talking about our dreams for the future. I never once thought about where her family came from or what she looked like compared to me. To me, Allison was simply perfect. My family lived in a small town in Montana, about 8 hours from Seattle. My mother, Diane, was 58 years old and had always been proud of what she called our family heritage. She would talk about our ancestors being among the first settlers in the region, as if that somehow made us special. My father, Robert, was 62, a quiet man who rarely voiced his own opinions and usually just went along with whatever my mother decided. Then there was my older sister, Meredith, 34, married to a man named Kyle, and they had a 5-year-old son named Brody. The first time I brought Allison home to meet everyone, I was nervous but hopeful. We pulled up to the farmhouse where I grew up, and I watched Allison take in the wide open fields and the big sky. She squeezed my hand and told me everything would be fine. My mother came out to greet us. She hugged me tight, then turned to look at Allison. There was this pause, maybe 3 or 4 seconds, where my mother just looked at her from head to toe without saying anything. It felt like an eternity. Finally, she said hello and let us inside, but the warmth I had expected was not there. At dinner that first night, Meredith asked Allison where she was really from. Allison had just finished explaining that she was born in San Diego, but my sister pressed further, asking about her parents, her grandparents, where the family originally came from. There were long silences around the table. Questions kept circling back to Allison's heritage, her background, her roots. I tried to steer the conversation elsewhere, but it kept returning to the same uncomfortable territory. After that visit, I convinced myself that my family just needed time to get to know Allison. They were traditional people from a small town. They were not used to meeting someone different from them. Given time, I believed they would see what I saw in her. A week after we returned to Seattle, my mother called me. She asked if I was sure about Allison. She wondered aloud whether Allison was the right fit for our family. I defended Allison, told my mother how wonderful she was, how happy she made me. My mother just sighed and said she only wanted what was best for me. I noticed that Meredith never sent Allison a friend request on social media. She never texted Allison directly, never made any effort to build a relationship with her. My father spoke to Allison only in the most basic, polite terms, never asking about her life, her work, her interests. But I chose to believe that everything would improve with time. I told myself that once they really got to know her, they would love her as much as I did. After 3 years together, I proposed to Allison. We were on a hiking trail overlooking Puget Sound, the sun setting behind the Olympic Mountains. When she said yes, tears streaming down her face, I felt like the luckiest man in the world. I called my mother that same evening to share the news. Her response was nothing like what I had imagined. There was no excitement, no congratulations, no happy tears. She simply said, "Oh, So you have decided then. That was it. No follow-up questions about the proposal, no offers to help with wedding planning, nothing. Meredith sent me a text message the next day that read, "Heard the news, congrats." 2 words, no exclamation points, no emojis, no phone call. I remembered when Meredith got engaged to Kyle 6 years earlier. My parents threw a party. My mother cried with joy. The whole extended family celebrated for weeks. The contrast was impossible to ignore, but I pushed it aside. I focused on my happiness with Allison and tried not to let my family disappointment poison our joy. Planning the wedding brought more tension. Allison and I decided to have a small ceremony in Seattle with about 80 guests. My mother complained about everything. The venue was too far from Montana. The caterer was serving food she was not familiar with. The decorations looked strange to her. Allison wanted to incorporate some Filipino traditions into our wedding, small touches that honored her heritage. When she mentioned this to my mother during a phone call, there was a long silence followed by a heavy sigh. My mother asked why we had to make things so complicated. Meredith declined to be a bridesmaid. She claimed she was too busy with Brody, but I knew that was not the real reason. She simply did not want to stand up there and support our marriage. On our wedding day, Allison family flew in from California. Her parents, her 2 brothers, her aunts and uncles and cousins, they all came with open arms. They hugged me like I was already their son. They laughed and danced and celebrated with genuine joy. My family sat on their side of the aisle looking uncomfortable the entire time. My mother wore an expression of mild distaste throughout the ceremony. She did not take a single photograph with Allison parents. During her speech at the reception, my mother talked only about me, about my childhood, my accomplishments, my future. She did not mention Allison once. Not a single word about the woman I had just married, the woman who was now her daughter-in-law. The years after our wedding were happy ones for Allison and me. We built a life together in Seattle. We bought a small house, adopted a rescue dog, and talked about starting a family someday. We called my parents about once a month, mostly out of obligation. We visited for major holidays, and each time Allison tried her best. She brought thoughtful gifts, she helped in the kitchen, she made conversation with everyone, but she was always treated like an outsider, like a guest who had overstayed her welcome. 2 years into our marriage, Allison told me she was pregnant. We were going to have a baby. I cannot describe the joy I felt in that moment. We held each other and cried happy tears and imagined what our child would look like, whose eyes they would have, what kind of person they would become. I called my mother to share the news. When I told her Allison was pregnant, there was silence on the other end of the line. Then she said, "Oh, is that so?" She did not ask how Allison was feeling. She did not ask about due dates or doctor appointments or nursery plans. All she said was, "I hope everything goes smoothly." Then she changed the subject. Meredith did not call to congratulate us. She sent a text message a few days later that simply said, "Mom told me, good luck." That night, Allison could see I was upset. She held my hand and told me that she did not need my family acceptance. She said that as long as we had each other, that was enough. But I could see the hurt in her eyes even as she tried to comfort me. 14 weeks into the pregnancy, we lost the baby. I will never forget that night. We rushed to the hospital after Allison started bleeding. The doctors did everything they could, but it was too late. I sat beside her bed, holding her hand, watching her stare at the ceiling with empty eyes. There was nothing I could say to make it better. All I could do was cry with her. The days that followed were the darkest of our lives. Allison stopped eating. She could not sleep. She would sit by the window for hours, not speaking, barely moving. I took time off work to care for her, to make sure she drank water, to hold her when the grief became too much. I called my mother, hoping for some comfort, some kindness, some acknowledgement of our loss. Instead, she was silent for a moment before saying, "Maybe it is for the best. Sometimes nature knows what is right." I could not believe what I was hearing. My own mother was suggesting that our baby dying was somehow a good thing. For the first time, I began to understand what she truly thought about Allison, about our marriage, about any children we might have together. I never told Allison what my mother said. She was already in so much pain. I could not add to it. 3 weeks after the miscarriage, Thanksgiving arrived. My mother called to insist we come home for the holiday. She said the whole family would be there and that I had to be present. I wanted to refuse. Allison was still weak, still grieving, still trying to find her way back to herself. but she told me she needed to get out of our apartment. Every room reminded her of the baby we had lost. She thought that maybe getting away even to a place that did not fully welcome her would help. So we made the 8-hour drive from Seattle to Montana. Allison slept most of the way, her head resting against the window. I glanced at her every few minutes, noticing how thin she had become, how pale her skin looked. My heart ached for her. When we arrived at my parents' house, everyone was already there. Meredith hugged me at the door but only nodded at Allison. Kyle shook my hand without really looking at either of us. Brody ran straight to his grandparents without acknowledging us at all. My mother came to the door and embraced me. Then she looked at Allison and said, "You look thin. Come inside." That was it. No acknowledgement of what we had been through. No sympathy for our loss. No hug for my grieving wife. Just a comment about her appearance and an instruction to enter the house. Allison squeezed my hand so tightly I could feel her trembling. I led her into the living room, and as I looked around at the walls covered with family photographs, I noticed something. There were pictures of my parents, of Meredith and Kyle and Brody, of distant relatives and family gatherings going back decades. But there was not a single photograph that included Allison. Dinner was served in the formal dining room. The table looked beautiful, covered with a white tablecloth decorated with autumn leaves and candles. The turkey sat in the center, golden brown and perfectly cooked. Everyone took their seats, and my mother stood at the head of the table, carving knife in hand. She began to speak about gratitude, about family, about tradition. She talked about how thankful she was to have everyone together, about how important it was to preserve what she called our family heritage. Then her eyes landed on Allison. And honestly, my mother said, her voice calm and measured, maybe that miscarriage was a blessing in disguise. Our family line remains pure. Some things just work out the way they should. The table went silent. I felt the blood drain from my face. I looked at Allison, who had gone completely still, her eyes filling with tears. Then Meredith laughed. She actually laughed. She reached over and patted her son Brody on the head, then looked at Allison with a smirk. "One real grandchild is enough, do you not think?" Meredith said. "At least we know Brody is 100% ours." The rest of the table laughed along with her. Kyle chuckled and shook his head. My father stared down at his plate, saying nothing, doing nothing to stop what was happening. My mother just smiled, pleased with herself, as if she had said something perfectly reasonable. Allison sat frozen beside me. Her hands were shaking under the table. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but she did not make a sound. She just sat there, absorbing their cruelty in silence. I felt something break inside me. My ears were ringing. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I looked around the table at these people I had known my entire life. My mother, my father, my sister, and I realized I did not recognize them anymore. Maybe I never really had. I set down my fork. The sound of metal against porcelain rang out in the sudden quiet. I stood up slowly, pushing my chair back from the table. "Allison is my wife," I said, my voice steady but cold. "She is my family. What you just said, what you have been doing for years, is unforgivable." My mother opened her mouth to speak, but I raised my hand to stop her. "This is the last time I will ever set foot in this house," I continued. "You have made your feelings clear. Now let me make mine clear. We are done." I reached down and took Allison's hand. She looked up at me with those beautiful brown eyes filled with tears and shock and something else. Relief, maybe, or gratitude. I led her out of the dining room, through the living room, and out the front door. I did not look back. I did not wait for anyone to respond or apologize or try to explain. There was nothing left to say. We drove in silence for the first 2 hours. The Montana highway stretched out before us, dark and empty. Allison cried quietly beside me, and I held her hand the entire way, not letting go even when I needed to shift gears. We stopped at a gas station somewhere near the Idaho border. The parking lot was empty, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. I turned off the engine and looked at Allison. "I am so sorry," I said. "I should have done this a long time ago. I should have protected you from them from the beginning." Allison shook her head. "I do not blame you," she whispered. "I know they are your family. I know how hard this is." "They were my family," I corrected her. "You are my family now. You are the only family I need." We held each other in that empty parking lot under the cold Montana sky, and I felt something shift inside me. I had lost my parents and my sister that night, but I had chosen Allison, and I would choose her again every single day for the rest of my life. When we got back to Seattle, I blocked my mother's phone number. I blocked Meredith and my father too. I did not want to hear their excuses or explanations. I was done. My mother tried to reach me through email. She wrote that I was overreacting, that I was being too sensitive, that family was family, and I needed to forgive and forget. She never once apologized. She never acknowledged that what she said was wrong. I did not reply. I deleted her emails without reading past the first few lines. Meredith sent messages from different phone numbers calling me selfish, accusing me of abandoning my own mother, telling me I was tearing the family apart. I ignored all of them. I wrote one final email to my mother explaining clearly why I was cutting contact. I told her that until she genuinely apologized to Allison, until she truly changed, I would not be part of her life. I told her that her words at that Thanksgiving table had revealed who she really was, and I could not pretend otherwise. She never apologized. Instead, she sent back a message blaming Allison for driving a wedge between us. That was the last communication I ever received from her. The months that followed were difficult but also strangely freeing. Allison started seeing a therapist to work through the grief of the miscarriage and the trauma of my family rejection. I joined her for some sessions, learning how to support her better, how to heal alongside her. Allison's family became my family. Her parents flew up from California to visit us, bringing food and love and laughter into our home. Her mother hugged me tight and said, "You are our son now. You always were." I finally understood what a real family felt like. Not one bound by obligation or blood alone, but one connected by genuine love and acceptance. Spring came, and with it, Allison began to smile again. The color returned to her cheeks. She went back to work at the hospital, finding purpose in helping others. We started talking about the future again, about trying for another baby when she was ready. 1 year after that terrible Thanksgiving, Allison told me she was pregnant again. This time, everything went smoothly. The doctor said the baby was healthy and growing perfectly. We cried together this time from joy instead of grief. I did not call my mother to share the news. She was no longer part of my life. She had made her choice and I had made mine. Allison family threw us a baby shower. The house was filled with decorations and gifts and people who genuinely loved us. I watched Allison laugh with her cousins, her hand resting on her growing belly, and I felt completely at peace. The day our daughter was born, I stood by the hospital window looking at Allison holding our baby girl. Both of them were healthy. Both of them were perfect. Allison looked up at me with tired eyes and the most beautiful smile I had ever seen. I realized in that moment that I had found my real family. Not the one I was born into, but the one I had chosen. The one that chose me back. I used to think family meant blood. I used to think you had to forgive and accept your relatives no matter what they did. But I learned that family is really about the people who love you, without conditions, who support you without judgment, who celebrate you instead of tearing you down. I do not hate my mother or my sister. I do not spend my days angry at them. I simply do not think about them anymore. I have let go of the bitterness because holding on to it would only poison the beautiful life I have built with Allison. Sometimes you have to lose one family to find your true family. Sometimes the hardest choice is the right one. And sometimes standing up for the person you love is the only thing that matters. As I watched Allison rock our daughter to sleep that first night, I whispered a quiet thank you. Not to anyone in particular, just to the universe, to fate, to whatever force had brought us together. This was my family now. This was my home. And this, I realized, was what Thanksgiving was really about. I want to ask you something before we end. Have you ever had to choose between your family and someone you love? Have you ever had to stand up against the people who raised you to protect your own heart? Share your story in the comments below. I know there are so many of us who have walked this difficult path, and sometimes it helps just to know we are not alone. If this story touched you in any way, please hit that like button and share it with someone who might need to hear it today. Subscribe to this channel if you want to hear more real stories about love loss and finding your way back to yourself. Thank you so much for watching and for being part of this community. I hope that whatever family looks like for you, it is filled with love, acceptance, and peace. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you